say thank you to everybody that's here today. I have just the special privilege of introducing our guest today. I know it's typical for you guys to hear from me on Mother's Day, but several weeks ago, I recognized a need even inside of me that this year I truly just wanted to listen. And so when I was thinking of who would we have on Mother's Day that I knew that I would enjoy, and only one person came to mind, and it was Lisa, my friend Lisa Clements. And so I sent her a message and I said, I know that this is a long shot, but could you please join us on Mother's Day? And she graciously agreed. Lisa, you guys, it's a privilege that you have to hear from her today. She has accomplishments and accolades that I couldn't even mention. She comes from a church formerly in Kansas City that she was an associate pastor. And when they joined that church, it was only a couple of hundred people, and it grew into the thousands while she served there in leadership. And they're now in Dallas, and she's a recent graduate with her master's degree. But the thing that I think is most special about Lisa is that she really was my very first one true friend in church. This woman was just my very first friend. When I came on the scene and Kelly and I got married and we had our 4 kids, Lisa was the one that was there when I went on bed rest with my twins. That's when we first met and became friends. And then when our 4th child showed up, Kelson and I had those 4 kids that were age 3 and under. Lisa organized months of meals for our family. And then she was the one and only person that was willing to go anywhere with me with 4 kids. She had 2 of her own, the very same ages as ours. We gave birth to our oldest daughters on the very same day, just hours apart, a couple of halls apart in the hospital. And she just was there for me. She was the one that was willing to have my 4 kids in her home. She had us to her house. We went places. She was the one that was with me when I lost Braxton at the zoo. I don't know if you guys remember, I shared that story once. This is my friend. And so it is just with great pride and privilege that I introduce to you today, Lisa Clements.
Love you. I can't tell you how exciting it is to be here, and what an honor that they ask. I have to tell you that the Goins family has impacted my life in ways that I can't even express. Pastor Goins, I saw that you were here. You will always be my pastor. When people ask me, where did you grow up? I still say, Broken Arrow Assembly, that's my church. And I know they've moved and they've changed some things, but this is my pastor. And it's such a privilege to come full circle and be able to share with you guys today. I wasn't going to get emotional, but I think it's Mother's Day. And then Kelly and I grew up together. He's much older than I am, though. And he may not know this, but I just want to take an opportunity. You are blessed with an amazing man as your pastor. I've watched him grow up. I was that kid in the youth group behind him, watching what he did and his life, and it always reflected Christ. And to see him and just his family and everything, it's a privilege. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Kelly, for having me this morning. Lisa and I became friends over bed rest. My children, I had to be on bed rest with both of them. My daughter is currently expecting her first child, and also went into preterm labor. So she calls it house prison. That's what she calls it, house prison. But I remember meeting Lisa and just, we connected. I said we had our first child on the same day. We have the same name. Our birthdays are just a few days apart. There was something that seemed to say we needed to be together. But one of my favorite, there are so many funny stories. Just walk into a restaurant and say, because this is what we would do on Wednesday nights, 2 adults, 6 high chairs. Nobody could ever accommodate that. So we would get booster seats and we would do whatever. But I remember one day we were traveling into Tulsa, probably going to Woodland Hills Mall. It's like an indoor park. And we were in Lisa's Suburban. And one of the twins, I can't remember which one, unbuckled themselves. And Lisa threatened them and whatever. So we stop at the stop sign. She throws it into park, crawls with a wooden spoon over the top, just glazes the tops of those chairs. I don't remember which one of them got it and got buckled back in their seats, but all 6 kids, their eyes are like this big. And they're like, And then we're just attending to our kids. We look up, and there's two guys in the truck behind us just dying laughing. I'm like, well, it's the day in the life of someone trying to cart around 6 children under the age of 3 at one point. All 6 of them under the age of 3. But I thank you for letting me be here on Mother's Day. Mother's Day is a fantastic day. And it's also a sad day for some people whose moms have gone on to be with the Lord, or who, I have a friend who's never been able to have a child. And she skips church on Mother's Day. And she said, please acknowledge those women that are there, because we all have mothered somebody spiritually. We miss our moms going forward, and I just appreciate you being here. And then some of you may have been lassoed into church because your mom said, oh, the one thing I want is for you to go to church with me. And you're like, okay, I'm here. And I just want to say I appreciate you being here today, and we just welcome each one of you. I don't have what some may seem as a traditional Mother's Day sermon. I just wanted to share 3 stories from the Bible with you, and then one day in the life of Lisa. If anyone's hung out with me for very long, they'll know that sometimes weird stuff happens to me. And there was a day almost 2 years ago that I want to tell you about. But all of these stories are to say, sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves, especially we moms. I am so glad that we just were getting the internet when my children were born. We still had dial-up. If any of you remember that. I couldn't Google, my kid has a runny nose, and see that it could be brain cancer and their brain's draining out or something. I didn't know all that. I had my mom and my grandmother, and that was it. But I look at the pressure some of the young moms are under, and then some of us just women. I am not one of those people that everything I touched is beautiful. Lisa is one of those. You go into her home, and she scoots a pot this way, and it's beautiful. Mine, not so much. There's lots of books, and there's dust, and there's dogs, and we just live life. And there's so much pressure that we put on ourselves to be something, or we can't be good enough, or we've messed up, or my kids aren't like their kids. And really what we're just seeing is other people's highlight reel. So today I'm going to tell you these 3 stories, and I thought we would just start at the beginning. God created 2 people and put them in a beautiful place. He said, this is yours. All of the animals are yours. This is your home. Enjoy it. Raise your family here. There's only one thing. This tree over here, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, don't eat of that. Everything else is yours, though. This is perfection. They had everything they wanted, and God came down and walked with them in the cool of the evening. Now, I want to clarify something for you. These aren't stories. This isn't like Disney. This actually happened. These are truths. God came down and walked with them in the cool of the evening. And one day, they made a decision that impacted the rest of humanity, changed the trajectory of everything that we know. They made a decision to eat of the tree of good and evil. The serpent came to Eve, and she said, you can be like God. He said, you can be like God. You can know all of this stuff. And she turned and she ate because, to be like God, to understand that. And then Adam ate, and immediately they were ashamed. Immediately they knew they had done something wrong. And what did they do? They ran and hid, because that's what we do. And they knew they could expect God in the cool of the evening. What would he do? I picture them hiding like my niece and nephew do. We play hide and go seek. Yesterday we were over there. My niece graduated from OSU, and then she has little brothers and sisters, and they were playing hide and go seek. And I saw one of them go into the pantry, and so I just leaned on the door a little bit. So until they had a panic attack. I don't know why I got great entertainment out of a 7-year-old having a panic attack in a dark closet trying to get out. But we would play hide and go seek, and I would be like, Bree, Parker, where are you? Many times I could see them. They're like their feet are sticking out, or they think they're hid. Where are you? Come out. And this is what God did. He came down in the cool of the evening, and he said, Adam, where are you? Why do you think God asked that? Because he already knew what had happened. He had the great opportunity to say to them, I brought you into this world. I'll take you out right now, and we'll start all over. But he didn't. He pursued Adam and Eve. He pursued relationship. He came down and he said, Adam, Eve, where are you? He wanted to hear their story. See, we serve a God who pursues us even when we feel we're unpursuable. He pursues us. He desires relationship with us. He heard what they had to say, and he said, guys, there's grave consequences to what you have done. And he laid all that out. They could no longer live in this paradise, and things were going to be hard. And then he covered their shame. He called animals to him. It's the first sacrifice that's offered for their sin. And he covered them. And he said, guys, my desire is to restore relationship with you. I will continue to pursue you when you feel you're unpursuable. Then if we jump ahead into the New Testament, the story I just told you is from Genesis 3, at the beginning of the Bible. We're going to jump into John 21. And if you're new or don't know, if you let your Bible fall open and flip a few pages to the right, you'll come to the book of John. In John 21, we're introduced to Peter. And we've been introduced to him earlier, but this story of Peter, a man who followed God, followed Jesus. And he was one of the 12. There were men and women that followed Jesus, and they were called his disciples. And then there were 12. And oftentimes we hear them referred to as the 12 or the 12 disciples who were closer, and they were in that inner circle and they followed him. And then there were 3, James, John, and Peter, who were the leaders of this group. Peter stood out among them, and he always had something to say. Jesus would teach through asking questions, as was the way it was done in that day. The rabbis would ask a question, and their disciples would answer back. And they're walking one day, and he says to his disciples, who do people say that I am? Because he's getting a following, creating buzz in the whole community. And he says, who do people say that I am? And his disciples say, some say you're John the Baptist, and some say you're Elijah. And Peter looks at him and looks in his eye, and he says, you are the Son of God. And Jesus says, Peter, this has only been revealed to you through my Holy Spirit. And Peter, I have a plan for you. I am going to build my church on your name. You're going to be a part of launching this whole thing. I'm going to build my church on you. A few days later, he's continuing to teach them. He's beginning to prepare them and tell them that he's going to die. That I am going to have to be sacrificed for your sins in this cause. They don't understand that. It doesn't resonate with them. And Peter steps forward and he says, it can't be. And God, Jesus, this can't be. And Jesus says, Peter, you're so zealous. But even you will deny me. Even you will deny me. But no, Peter's like, no. Peter always had an answer. No, not going to happen. I'm not going to do it that way. I will always stand for you, Jesus. I'll be right there with you. Later that night, he is captured. Jesus is taken by the Roman authorities at night, in the middle, like a mob mentality. They come, they capture him, they take him. Peter's following at a distance, and he sees this man that he thought was the answer. He's being beaten, scourged. He doesn't know what's going to happen. And he's following along, and someone says, wait a minute, aren't you with him? Peter says, no. What? No, I'm not with him. A little bit longer. He's warming his hands around a fire, trying to stay close enough to see what's happening. And someone says, wait a minute. You sound like you're a Galilean. Are you with him? Peter says, no. Adamantly no. And someone else forces the point. Peter curses at them and says, no. And at that moment, he realizes, Jesus told me this was going to happen. I've denied him. I denied him. And now he's dead. I watched him die on the cross, and he's dead. The death of a dream. The death of everything, the way I thought it was going to be. It's gone. Later on, 3 days later, some of the female disciples go to the tomb to take care of the body of Jesus, and it's gone. And who do they run to tell? They run to tell Peter. Peter runs to the tomb. He sees that it's empty. Then he interacts with the resurrected Jesus. And he talks to him. But what does he go ahead and do? He goes back to what he had been doing before. He goes back to being a fisherman. Because Peter, he was like, it didn't turn out like I thought it would. And I denied Jesus. How can he use me now? He told me he had a plan and a purpose for me, and I've messed totally up. What can I do? So he goes back to what he knew to do. And he's such an influencer. He influenced many of the disciples, some of them whom weren't even fishermen before, to go with him, and they begin fishing. And they fish at night because the water is cool, so the fish come to the top because they're net fishermen, and they throw their nets out. They fished all night. They've caught nothing. And as the dawn is breaking, some of them, they're coming into shore, and they see a person on the shore, and that person yells out, "Did you catch anything?" My dad is a fisherman. I know Kelly is. And I don't know how many conversations I've had with somebody standing boat to boat. Are they biting? What are you using? They talk to one another. These are men. My dad would never talk to a stranger in public. But in a boat on the banks, hey, give me some information. So this wasn't unusual. And then the man on the bank says, have you tried the other side? Let your net down on the other side. And the disciples on the boat became energized because they remembered another time at the beginning when they first met Jesus, that he said, guys, put your net down on the other side. See, at that point, Jesus is renewing a promise he had for them too. You guys all went back to fishing, but I'm here to say, I still have a plan for you. Put your nets down on the other side. And once again, they were filled to where they could barely pull them back up. John says, it is Jesus. And Peter, he's just impetuous. He just jumps off, swims to shore. And Jesus is there waiting for him, cooking breakfast for him, restoring relationship. And then, you know what he does? He says, Peter, walk with me for a minute. Walk with me. And they began to walk together. And Jesus said to him, Peter, do you love me? There's a whole discourse there. But what Jesus is doing is saying, remember, Peter, when I said I had a plan for you, I'll build my church on you, I still have that plan. Feed my sheep. Peter, feed my sheep. See, Jesus pursued Peter individually, even when Peter had thought he was so messed up he was unworthy. Jesus said, no. See, what I planned, I will accomplish. Some of us here today feel like we have messed up so badly that I'm just going to skate in under the radar. God can't use me anymore. But our God pursues us even when we feel we're unworthy of the pursuit. Our God desires that relationship with us. The ultimate pursuit that our God had was sending his son Jesus to live on earth with us as a man. Every other religion that you will look at, you have to be good enough for God. You have to pursue God. Our God pursues us. Our God sent his son for us. John 3:16 is one of the things that we see up in stadiums and slogans and different things like that. And it's almost become a cliche in our culture. But I want you to listen to me closely. Our God pursued us so much that this is how he loved us. He sent his only son. Now the mothers in this room, I'm like, what? He sent his only son to offer forgiveness for us, for the whole world, so that we can know him. See, our God pursued us at all costs. The first sacrifice offered was that offering he offered for Adam and Eve. It was a foreshadowing, a telling of what was to come with his son. See, he has a plan for each of us. You can't mess up too much. I don't think anybody in this room has sinned so badly that you have messed up the trajectory of all mankind for all time. No. And God pursued them. Maybe some of us have walked with Jesus and we've served him and then we denied him or turned his back on him. But God would say to you today, I still have a plan for you. You don't have to live under the radar. And maybe some of you today, this is the first time that you've heard that the God of the universe pursued you, sent his only son to die for you so that you may live with him in eternity and be equipped to live this everyday life. If that's you today, this is the day to make the decision to go, I'm coming back, or I'm making that first choice. I want to know you, Jesus. See, God pursues us in every way. He desires restoration of relationship. He desires that we live in community with one another. He desires to know us. So as I wrap up, I want to tell you the story of August 17th, 2013. I had just woke up that morning. I had to officiate a baby's funeral. And just those words, nobody should ever have to do that. A baby's funeral. I woke up early to pray because I just needed to pray. And I picked up my phone and it was lit up with missed calls. I had had it on Do Not Disturb overnight. And I'm like, what in the world? I listened to the voicemail, and in the background when it clicked on, I could hear sirens and the frantic voice of my friend saying, Lisa, I just wanted to let you know that Colin, who is my son, he was 18 at the time, a senior in high school, accidentally burned our house down with his friend. The detectives may be showing up on your doorstep. I couldn't even breathe. I can't even tell you everything that went through my head that morning. I looked at Eric and I was like, somehow communicated that. And then in my notes, I wrote, I ran upstairs. My kids, if they heard that, would she didn't. I had just had my knee, a total knee replacement 8 weeks prior to this. So I went upstairs. And my son, when I walked into his room, knew something was really wrong because Mom went up the stairs. 6 a.m. And I said, Colin, you burned the Beckett's house down. And he woke up gulping sobs, just racking his body. You see, they had gone over part of the youth group. And this family, we have kids the same age. They have 4 kids with twins in there as well. And it was a youth group prank that they had thought they had put the fire out, and an ember had relit later on in the night. I can't even comprehend what it would be like to get my children out of a burning home. I can't explain to you the horror and the grief that I felt that our family had caused this, and that I didn't know if my son was going to be arrested. This really good kid who made a bad decision. Did I say that it was mine and Eric's 22nd anniversary as well? So we like to do things like, whoa. So I'm reeling. There's lots of phone calls going back and forth between the church and different things. And my lead pastor called and said, I can do the funeral. But I was like, no, our chaos shouldn't impact this family. I can't even imagine the loss they're going through. I'll go do the funeral. Eric and Colin will go down to the side of the fire. Madeline, my daughter, went with me to the funeral, and we laid this baby to rest. And I went to the family and said, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to excuse myself. We had a family emergency this morning, and kind of handed the family off to our children's pastor. And I left to drive down what seemed like a very long road to get to this other family's house. I called my mom, always call your mom. And I said, Mom, this horrible thing has happened. I don't have any answers. I don't want to talk, but I need you to pray. And I pulled up in front of these people's home. Already, the church family is there, bringing food, bringing clothing. And Madeline and I walk up the sidewalk, and Sam, big man, comes up to me, and it's his home. Behind him, smoke is still coming off the house. And he takes my face in his hands like this. And he said, I need you to hear something. He said this, and he does like this to his burnt house. And I'm not saying, it was like gone. He said, this is all stuff. And he pointed to the two boys, my son and his friend. He said, those are the only things that matter here today. He goes, I need you to hear this, that this mistake is not going to derail these two boys and what God has for them. The grace that he exhibited. The image of God as he allowed Christ to move through them and to show compassion to our family. His wife, Anna, wrote me a little segment because I told her I was going to be preaching on this. And she said, our opportunity, mine and Sam's, to give grace and forgiveness to the boys who were our opportunity to give grace and forgiveness to the boys was more like a swell of love that came forth. Sam and I had known and continue knowing the lavish love of the Heavenly Father. We had always fully believed that God was working in and on our behalf, and that he had our backs, our futures, and whatever life held. The events of the early hours on August 17, 2013, and losing our house brought us to a critical moment. Sam and I were face to face with law enforcement, encouraging us to press charges and ultimately see two boys that we loved have their lives destroyed. It was a shock to our brains to even imagine. For us, all that matters was that these boys know that God had their backs, their futures, and whatever they had to face. It may seem hard to imagine that the boys' future was the priority, but as I said, there was a swell of love that God brought. Knowing our own failures had been met by forgiveness, our choice to mirror God's love was undeniably natural. While an action that led to a whole house fire is not small, any of us are capable of lesser and greater misdeeds. Anna and Sam Beckett. It was Christ in them that allowed them to extend grace and forgiveness to our family. I will never forget the feeling this grace and receiving it had for our family. There was no denying it. It was a huge mistake. Unintentional, but with grave consequences. This mistake impacted this family in ways I can't even conceive. Like Christ, they reached out, though, and said, "You matter." All these feelings welled up in me. I'm not worthy of this. How can I make this right? I couldn't. I could do nothing but receive the grace that was extended. I watched them as they pursued relationship with our family, forgiveness with these boys. They had very difficult days ahead, and someday that'll be their story to tell. But this family allowed Christ to be extended through them. Their kids texted my son, "Hey, bud, I want to let you know how much we love you. Dude, I love you." He had boys. Can you imagine? I began to wonder, how do I live? How do I do this life if I don't do it in community with others? As I stood on that sidewalk, there were people bringing meals and food, as I mentioned, people ministering to these two young boys, pulling them aside and saying, "Do you know some dumb mistakes I made in my life?" How do we live if we don't live in relationship with one another, letting go of hurts, letting go of the past? Each of us has made mistakes that we shouldn't have. But with Christ in us, an example to us, God continues to pursue us. And that example, that Christ in us, he asks us to reflect that to others. Are we extending grace? Are we offering forgiveness? Are we pursuing relationships? Standing on the sidewalk that day in Kansas City, I realized no matter what I had done, I couldn't make this right. And no matter what I have done in my life, I can't do anything to earn God's love. He just loves me. And I pray that with that Christ in me, it enables me to pursue that relationship with others. It's been hard the last 18 months. There's been some yucky stuff that has happened. And God has gone, "Remember when Sam put your face in his hands and said he forgives you? Do that." I'm like, "Oh, God," but he's like, "No, do that. Because Christ is in you, you image me, you reflect me. Because you remember, I pursued you. I choose relationship with you." This is about community. 2 weeks later, after that fire, there's just so many miracles. They weren't prosecuted. It was just a God thing, so many. 2 weeks later, those two boys left. One went to college down in Texas, and one went to Australia to share Jesus. The one who went to Texas, my son, last year, was offered a full scholarship with the Assemblies of God to go to Armenia on just a most amazing ministry opportunity. So this boy who burned a house down, God said, "You know what? I still have a plan for you. One of you went to Australia. One of you went to the other side, to the Middle East, and shared Jesus." These two boys could have been derailed if it weren't for forgiveness, for somebody reflecting Jesus in them. They continue to struggle with it, but these boys shared Jesus all over the world. Because just like when Satan came into the garden and taunted Eve, you can be like God. I feel like he comes down and taunts us every day and says, "You're not worthy of God. You're not as good as they are. Look at their Facebook page. It's pretty cool looking." And you know what? That's not our God. Our God is the one who came down in the cool of the evening and walked around and said, "Adam, where are you?" And today, he's here, and we have access to him because of the sacrifice of his son. And he said, "I want to walk with you, Will you accept the forgiveness that I offer? And then will you extend that to others? And I want to talk to the moms and the women in this building today. Will you forgive yourself? Will you extend grace to yourself? Because I feel like that's the thing we as women do the most. I do. We're so harsh on ourselves that we limit ourselves. And God says, no, I have a plan. I have a purpose for you. Let it go. Let yourself off the hook. There is no condemnation in Christ Jesus. There has been no perfect people, and there will be none until we are with Christ. Just walk and image me, and I have a plan for you. So, what I ask for you today is come out from the bushes, come out from your hiding places, and pursue and embrace God as He pursues you. Accept the forgiveness, accept the grace, and then extend that to others.